It started over something so small, a bottle of iced tea. Nothing about that moment looked dangerous, nothing felt out of place. But within minutes, 3 lives would be gone, and a story far darker than anyone could imagine would begin to unfold. December 8th, 2022, 2:45 p.m. A quiet winter afternoon in White Oak, Montgomery County. Inside a dashing convenience store, everything felt normal. Employees moved casually, stocking shelves, chatting, even laughing. Business was slow, the kind of shift where time drags, the kind where nothing ever happens. Then a man in a black hoodie walked in. At first, nothing about him stood out. He bought a gas can, took a little longer than usual at the counter. A second cashier stepped in to help. The line formed, then cleared just as quickly. And just like that, everything went back to normal. Or, at least, it looked that way. Moments later, the same man returned. He paid for gas, walked to the drinks aisle, picked up a sports drink, paid again, and left, calm, quiet, unbothered. Nothing about him raised alarm. Then, at exactly 2:58 p.m., another man walked in. This time, something felt different. He moved straight to the drinks aisle, no hesitation, no browsing. The cashier noticed him immediately, watched him closely. The man grabbed a bottle of iced tea, walked up to the counter, and held it out. But he didn't let go. The cashier reached for it. The man held it tighter. Then, without paying, he twisted the cap open. That's when the tension started. No words could be heard, but the body language said everything. The cashier grew frustrated. The man stayed calm, almost too calm. Outside, a group of teenagers began gathering near the entrance. Inside, the moment. I'm stretched. Then suddenly, the man dropped the bottle, and everything changed. He began throwing items across the counter. The cashier disappeared for a split second, then came back, holding a steel pipe. He swung, and in that instant, the man reached into his clothing, pulled out a handgun, and fired once, twice, again, and again. The sound of gunshots tore through the store. Outside, chaos exploded. Teenagers scattered, running in every direction. A car pulled into the lot, then immediately reversed out. Inside, silence followed the violence. The cashier lay motionless, and the shooter calmly picked up his iced tea, turned, and walked out like nothing had happened. By 3:06 p.m., first responders arrived. They rushed inside, did everything they could, but it was already too late. The victim, 61-year-old Alu Wandu, was gone. A man who came to America chasing a better life. A man simply doing his job, now dead. But what investigators would discover next was far more disturbing. The suspect wasn't a stranger. He had been there before, caused problems, made threats just 1 week earlier. He told the manager he would come back and kill him. This wasn't random. This was something building, something waiting to explode. Police began reviewing surveillance, following his path, tracking every movement. That's when they caught a break. Cameras across the street captured him walking, not running, not panicking, walking, straight into an apartment complex, still holding that same iced tea. Minutes after taking a life, he walked inside like it was just another day. At that moment, investigators realized this wasn't over, it was just beginning. A SWAT team was called in. A no-knock warrant approved. They surrounded the apartment, prepared for anything. Then they made entry. Inside, they found him, asleep, on a mattress, like nothing had happened. He was taken into custody without resistance. But something inside that apartment didn't feel right. Officers noticed it immediately. A smell, strong, unmistakable. The kind of smell that stops you in your tracks. They followed it, down a hallway, into a back room. And what they found left even experienced officers shaken. A body, decomposing, badly. So far gone, it was hard to even tell who it was. One officer looked closer and said quietly, "You think it's a female?" Another replied, "Yeah, maybe his mother." But that question would only lead to something even more chilling, because just moments later, the suspect asked if he could call his mum, so if that and wasn't his mother, then who was lying in that room? Investigators returned the next day, and the truth began to emerge. The woman was identified as Denise Middleton, 26 years old, his girlfriend, and she had been dead for weeks, shot multiple times, inside that same apartment where he had been living, sleeping, eating, existing. As her body decomposed just feet away, but it gets worse. Denise wasn't alone. She was pregnant, 8.5 months, 2 lives taken before they even had a chance. Detectives now had 2 crime scenes, 1 suspect, and a timeline that didn't make sense. During interrogation, he didn't act like someone caught. He talked, calm, almost proud, like this was a story, like something out of a book. He claimed self-defense, said he was attacked, said he had no choice. But the evidence told a different story. Shell. Casings, DNA, the same weapon, used in both killings. And then, his search history. How long does it take for a body to smell? How to move a body? How to plead insanity? The truth was clear. This wasn't panic. This wasn't survival. This was calculated, cold, and deeply disturbing. On May 16th, 2024, a jury found him guilty, first-degree murder, firearm charges, and months later, guilty again, for the deaths of Denise and her unborn child. 3 lives, gone. A hard-working man, a young woman, and a child who never got the chance to breathe. The sentence, 3 consecutive life terms, plus 80 years. He tried to control the story, to shape it, to call it self-defense, but in the end, the truth spoke louder than anything he could say. And now, the story ends. But the questions remain. How does something so small turn into something so horrific? And how many warning signs were ignored before it was too late? If you made it this far, stay with me for more stories like this, because sometimes the scariest stories are the real ones.